Welcome to Mommy Heal Thyself. We feature guests who provide you with the tools, resources, and strategies you need to say no to a life of pain and suffering from all forms of preventable disease, toxic drugs, and unnecessary surgeries. We hope to inspire you to boldly reclaim your ability to heal and to serve the ones you love. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of, let me rewind. How do I pronounce your last name?
Wiener.
Wiener. Just want to make sure. Okay, let's restart.
Thank you for checking. I appreciate it. It's fine.
No, I messed up the last time with someone's name, and I'm like, ah! So, in any case, let's try this again. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Mommy Heal Thyself. Today, we have with us Dr. Craig Weiner. He's currently a certified trainer for MTOT International, and he currently serves as the chair of the Board of Trustees for EFT International and is the co-director of EFT Tapping Training Institute. He is an EFT master trainer of trainers, a mentor, and accredited certified advanced EFT practitioner. In addition, he has co-produced the film, The Science of Tapping, with his wife and partner, Alina Frank. He continues to maintain a private online client practice, though most of his time and energy is devoted to volunteering, training, mentoring, certifying practitioners, and giving presentations at various integrative healthcare conferences internationally. He has worked in the healthcare field for over 33 years as a chiropractor, offering integrative approach to support individuals in their physical and mental health and well-being. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Weiner. How are you?
Thank you, Dr. Gamble. I'm doing just beautifully. It's spring here in the Pacific Northwest. Everything's blooming, and I'm doing really well. Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. Well, we have so much to cover today. I would love for you to first give us an understanding of what is the MTOT health approach.
Okay, so MTOT health is a perspective. MTOT health is a way of looking at things. MTOT health, through the way that a MTOT health practitioner views the world, somewhat like I think many people have heard of like a trauma-informed approach, which is included within MTOT health. MTOT health is a perspective that we really look to understand individuals, especially women, since we'll be talking about them, and how symptoms and disease is meaningful, how our body's reactions really to specific stressors and circumstances in our lives go through processes, and how their body is programmed based on their experiences. So in other words, things happen to us in life. We develop emotional responses to them. We have thoughts and beliefs that get created according to the things that we've lived through in life circumstances. And when we can start to see that how our body shows up in the world through symptoms and diagnoses and diseases are often meaningful systems and programs that are put into place to help us overcome challenging circumstances and how to be able to better negotiate those in our life, that they're not just happenstance, they're not just arbitrary, that when we start to have a better understanding to the cognitive and emotional aspects to what's happening to us based on what we've lived through, it starts to allow us to be more compassionate with ourselves. It allows us to take more supportive self-care towards healing. It's so easy when anybody is going through suffering, physical and emotional suffering, to feel victimized by that, to feel like it happened to us and we didn't have a choice, to feel that we had nothing to do with that, that it feels often arbitrary, and we end up creating, I mean, I know you know this with clients and patients, is it's so common for us to not like our bodies, to feel at war with, to feel antagonized or at the effect of. And that doesn't generate hormones or neurotransmitters. It doesn't facilitate healing nearly as well. So a MTOT health approach can be from multiple types of practitioners, whether it be a chiropractor or an energy worker or a coach or a medical doctor, nutritionist, acupuncturist, can employ a meta health approach for better understanding the emotional root causes to the biological and physiological changes that are happening in our body. And as we start to understand the meaning of why they're going through, it can facilitate greater self-compassion and greater healing. So that's a beginning starting place, I think.
Well, let's drill down a little bit more because I'd really
Okay.
like to get a little bit better understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Give me an example of what do you mean by understanding disease as meaningful? What is a common
Mm-hmm.
issue that you find women are dealing with that perhaps having a shift in perspective and viewing the quote unquote disease process as meaningful would be helpful?
Yeah, so let's kind of talk about the way the mind-body interplay, the way that it does. In other words, when we look to there's so many kinds of symptoms and pains and different things we can have in our body, and let's look at different kinds of maybe, I don't know, neck aches, back aches, different ways in which people hurt. Pretty common. I'm a chiropractor. I see a lot of that all the time, and women come in with different kinds of physical pains that they're suffering from. And what they often have as an underlying mechanism is often a way in which life circumstances have triggered stress-like responses to different situations that often challenge their self-worth, their self-ability to be able to overcome, their ability to stand up for themselves, for example, or speak up for themselves. So it's very common, for example, I get to see a lot of back pain that women are suffering from for all different kinds of reasons, and all different kinds of diagnoses, and whether it be arthritis and tendinitis and disc-related problems that often when we look to, for example, our lower back and our hips and our pelvis, we start to look at ways in which the stressors that are happening previous to the pain often have to do with life situations that are challenging my ability to feel like I can stand up for myself and move forward in a situation. Somebody's telling me I can't. It's bringing up memories of why I can't take an action step, or I don't feel worthy enough to be able to or stand up for myself. And so often what is happening before the pain sits in are stressful situations in our work, in our home life, in relationship, that challenge the sense of our ability to be able to do that. And so what ends up happening is we go through these periods of stress that challenge and often bring up memories of being told that we are not enough in some way, that we can't do things for ourselves, that we have to depend on somebody else, etc. I'm speaking on behalf of, and whether it's a man or woman, but especially in this subject, we'll be talking about women, that's not uncommon, that they've been informed in various ways that they're not enough in themselves. And so they have to lean on others or get support from others, and rather than be able to stand up for themselves. And so what starts to happen is when we live under a period of stress for a period of time, it takes its toll on the tissues and organs in our body that are often specifically related, that have thematic references to different issues that we're dealing with emotionally. And when we start to look through a meta health approach, one of the really interesting things is by the time that we start to take some steps to stand up for ourselves, to be able to heal that part of ourselves that feels like we can do something, and I do have the abilities and skills to do this and take that next step and get the support I need, that when we start to take healing steps forward, that part of the healing of that in our tissues is often the inflammatory process of healing the tissues. But with inflammation and swelling and healing is often the pain, and it can be very confusing for people because they've actually lived through the stressful, challenging period. They started to take steps to actually move in the right direction, and then there's pain associated with that. But symptoms are often interpreted as something bad. Symptoms are often interpreted as where the problem is, when often symptoms are actually a sign of the healing. I think one very common one is when we get a fever. I think in our common consciousness, we now know nobody likes to have a fever. It's not a comfortable thing to go through sweating and have a fever. And yet we understand the fever is our body's natural response of fighting off something in the healing process. we don't often see pain as being sometimes a sign of a healing progress. So when we start to understand that our body has natural responses, that we start to understand that symptoms, if we can understand they're meaningful, and we start to inquire and be open to why is this going on for me and why now,
Mm-hmm.
then that starts to remove some of the stress. It starts to remove some of the self-defeating thoughts and beliefs that get reinforced. It starts to allow us to be more compassionate with ourselves. That starts to generate different levels of healing compounds and understanding in our body. And we can start to move through a process much quicker. I work with patients all the time in pain. And when they start to understand, and I ask them, questions, if we can look through the lens of my body is always attempting to heal. My body is always doing its best to overcome the challenges. What might be the meaning of why this is happening now? What is your body asking of you right now? What is it asking you to do? And so often, with people, with women that are having so much stress because they're trying to handle family and work and so many different things at once, that often they don't get the support or the break that they need. And so often when they're set down by pain, it's their body asking them, you need to take a break. You haven't given yourself a minute to yourself for self-care in months here. So if we look to the body actually doing our best to give us what we really need, which is a rest, which is getting some support, which is some time away, which is some boundaries, etc., then we can start to look at, oh, that's what needs to happen here. And when I can take those forward moving steps, my body can start to heal. The pain goes away. It doesn't have to be hitting us over the head, telling us, take a moment for yourself here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love what you're saying because, part of why we have our title being Mommy Heal Thyself is to encourage our ladies to have that conversation, that loving conversation with themselves, to have that conversation with whatever it is that is speaking
Right.
the resonance of quote unquote dis-ease is really something that says, I'm not too comfortable right now with what's going on.
Right.
And to have that conversation, to talk with ourselves instead of saying, what's wrong with you? And internalizing that anger, that dissatisfaction, and all of those negative emotions that will further complicate the issue as opposed to promoting the healing. So I love it. Absolutely love what you're saying.
Yeah, but I love that you address that there's often the underlying stressor, but then on top of that, we add the what's wrong with you to our bodies. Sometimes I'll ask people to talk to their bodies as if it was their child, especially if they have a young one, right? It's like, their child is sneezing and coughing. They're not like, what's wrong with you? How come you keep sneezing? And then, right, I mean, it's like you would never do that. It's like, oh, what's needed here?
Yeah.
Right? What needs to happen here? What kind of care is needed here? But we've lost that ability, so many of us, to speak to ourselves in that same way or to speak to our bodies that way. So meta health, there are a variety of different exercises and processes that we can use. We'll talk about some of them, but sometimes just doing what we call organ breathing or breathing into our tissues and just starting to develop a more intimate relationship with my ovaries, my stomach, my breasts, whatever the tissues are that are giving some sort of symptoms or talking to us, really, because that's really what symptoms are, as a way of communicating.
Absolutely.
Disease is a diagnosis, is just a label for that communication and what it's trying to share in order to try to heal something underneath. And so if we sometimes, I'm always amazed, just taking a minute to find that area that's giving you a problem or that looks like a problem, right? And just breathe into that and begin an inquiry or a conversation is, what are you feeling?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you need from me right now?
Mm.
And starting to cultivate that compassion. Clearly, there's something going on here, right? I mean, if we're when we are our best parent, right? When we're our best selves with our parent, and we can be curious with our child, they're calling out for something. And our body is calling out for something. It's needing something. And so if we can be in a place of safe inquiry with ourselves, that really helps to often find the answers that we weren't giving time to listen to. And that's a lot about what mental health is about, is getting curious, is understanding that there's always a reason,
Mm-hmm.
that there's always some stressor that is either being re-triggered or a situation which is now causing our bodies to have to act out in order to try to resolve something, or promote us to be able to take some steps toward what we need and we're not asking for.
Yeah.
And that's, as a as a woman, as a mother, especially, that has such a strong innate component to try to give and take care of so many things. The person that often gets left out is the time and patience to ask oneself what one needs.
Yeah.
So common.
Now, in alignment, going a little bit further in terms of some of the modalities that we can utilize
Mhm.
to support the healing process from a
Yeah.
holistic perspective and with the understanding of this communication, let's
Mhm.
take a step into tapping. Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
more about what that is and how it's part of this dance, let's say,
Sure.
of healing.
Sure. So from meta health, there are many different modalities and tools that can be used using that understanding.
Mhm.
One very powerful and that it's commonly used is something called EFT, or EFT tapping, emotional freedom techniques. And this goes back to the 1980s, in which there was a merging of understanding um, how the body works on an energy system from a Chinese medicine standpoint, along with cognitive psychology, along with forms of holistic counseling, and combining these in such a way that has become a very strongly research-backed system that can very effectively, in a rather quick amount of time, help us to create and understand the connections between the emotions that we're feeling that are triggered by the circumstances in our life, that when emotions don't move through, I mean, emotions are basically energy in motion.
Mhm.
Emotions are completely natural. They're how we respond to circumstances. And they all kind of have a half-life of, we feel angry when something happens and it moves through us and it passes through. We feel grief, we feel sadness, we feel frustration, we feel pressure and overwhelm, and all those things are completely natural emotions to feel. The problem is that when we don't support them in moving through, and they get stuck,
Mhm.
they get stuck. And when energy and emotions get stuck in the body and not be able to move through, they lead to systems not working, nervous systems not being able to get regulated, ways of holding on to patterns that then lead to thoughts that then lead to decisions and beliefs that limit the way we live, the choices that we live and we make in our life, and how we see ourselves and how we see the world as not good enough or unsafe or not fair, or all the different ways that we view the world. So tapping, or EFT tapping, is a system where we're stimulating a particular, usually 9 points, where we're tapping on very specific meridian points in the body that are on the upper body, while we're saying certain phrases that are tuning us into the emotion that's there that maybe we're not allowing, witnessing and owning.
Mhm.
Even though I'm feeling right now, like as a mom, and a child does something and it makes me in the moment just feel so angry and even hate them in the moment,
Mhm.
right? Can't say that, but I do. I feel that in the moment, and it's just like, even though right now I just want to oh, I'm so mad I could just do something, and I
Mhm.
feel that, and I tune into where I feel it in my body, even though I feel so angry at little Johnny right now for spilling his milk, something silly, right? And I know I shouldn't feel angry, and I know he's only a little kid, and yet I still feel angry. It's my response, probably because it's not just about that one time. But if I can allow myself and I tap on the anger that I'm feeling about that and noticing how I'm feeling and experience it in my body, I can actually just help that move through and move quicker into compassion and move quicker into behaviors that are nurturing for myself and for my child. Dan Siegel is a great neuropsychologist, and he uses a wonderful, simple analogy of kind of the hand model of the brain. And he says, when our whole brain and nervous system is working together, we're at our best. But when something triggers me and I flip my lid, I don't have access to all the parts of my brain that can be empathetic and compassionate and understanding and have a great way to play and and move through this. And I'm reacting from a defensive or emotive or
Mhm.
reactive way. And so when we tap or use other methods that Meta Health uses, we can start to regulate ourselves so I can be most creative in the situation, and be okay with the way I reacted and self-accepting as well. So EFT helps to stimulate these points through tapping on points. And it can go much deeper than that. It can be either a self-regulation tool that I teach people all the time, or a deeper therapeutic tool for understanding from a mental health perspective why certain conditions showed up in my body. So it can be used in a lot of ways.
So now, is there a particular issue that you find commonly when dealing with women or mothers that can be addressed with a certain sequence of tapping?
Yeah, so I mean, here's the thing for me is, we look at the research, and there's a lot of research behind things like anxiety and depression and stress and PTSD and all kinds of things. I don't believe that there's any one sequence that helps all people, because you know what? My anger at little Johnny for spilling his milk, for one person, is because it feels like it's disrespectful of me because I have a history of being disrespected, even though it's ridiculous to put that. Somebody's feeling disrespected and not paying attention to right now. And clearly there's a need she has that is calling out for attention. But we all have our own unique relationships to what's happening in the moment. So from a self-regulation standpoint, we can go ahead and we can tap on just what I'm feeling in the moment. The frustration, the overwhelm, the annoyance. There's not a sequence. We're tapping on what I'm feeling about a certain situation. However, when we get deeper, it's really, why do I keep responding? Why do I keep overreacting to that way? Then that becomes very individualized, because my history is different than your history. That's different than the next person's history. So I'd say there's kind of two ways of using tapping. One is to self-regulate, to neuroregulate in the moment, which is just owning what I'm feeling, which is as the same and different as each person is in the moment. But then when we start to look to, why am I overreacting? Why is this particular thing getting to me more than some other things that happen? That's where we work with a practitioner to be able to dive deeper into my own history to understand why. Why is this suddenly feeling like the helplessness that maybe I learned earlier in my life? Or why is it making me feel so reactive or angry? Because there's reasons in my history that something happening that's surprising or taking control away from me makes me feel angry. So that becomes really unique. So I'm not a big believer in what we call scripts or just kind of uniform tapping for a situation, because we're all unique beings that have unique histories.
So is there a particular event that occurred in your life that brought you to the world of tapping?
Wow, okay, that's a good question, but I'll try to make it brief. I actually, when I first found EFT, I was really skeptical about it. I had read about it online. I thought, there's no way that tapping on your head and face can help everything from headaches to back pain. I mean, just like a million different conditions. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. So I just like shoved it aside for 2 years. But kind of like you, I often did presentations and dialogues and conversations in my clinic for years. And one time I just, I heard about it again. I said, you know what, I poo-pooed it. I didn't really know much about it. Maybe I should find out a little bit more. I started to do some research, and I was like, there's a lot of research behind this. This isn't just a little, like, more research than a lot of kind of therapies. And the thing that made the difference for me is I looked at what did so many of these different conditions that was being looked at have in common, and it was the stress response. If you look at the research that looks at the role of stress from, I don't care, heart disease to cancer to diabetes, I mean, it goes on to addictions and all phobias, I mean, on, that if I can alter the way that I respond in a stressful situation, whether it's a bad relationship or a bad whatever circumstance, that if I can control and alter my stress response to that, then this can really affect a lot of different things. So, I mean, I've worked with people with regard to their careers and their relationship and their health, because EFT tapping helps me to own my emotional response, get to the root of why I'm responding. A colleague of mine once said, and I love this, it has a Midwest kind of twang to it, is, the thing ain't never the thing. It's like, I love that, because right? Because what's showing up now, it's like, somebody drives by and I react all angry because they're speeding by me. like I don't know half the circumstance that's going on, and clearly it's not just about the current moment. The current moment is a perfect example of something much bigger from earlier, and when I get curious about that, I can make those connections. But
Yeah.
we're not always in a place to be able to respond that way. So being able to have a tool like tapping to be able to regulate myself, or to teach my kids, oh my God, so powerful to be able to
Yes.
teach kids to tap, because once they move on quickly, they're so mad at somebody for saying something mean to them or pushing them that they like resolve the emotions like that, and they're like, all right, I want to go play with them now. And you're like, wow.
That is it.
So I know a lot of parents that do EFT for themselves
Yeah.
because of their own worry about their kids. That adds more stress to the situation. But then being able to share tapping with their kids is one, just it's an amazing tool for transforming the relationship and teaching that social emotional learning and that neuroregulation techniques for self-soothing that I never learned when I was a kid. I don't know about you. So yeah, it's really
I
powerful.
always share with my parents that the greatest gift you can give to your child is the ability to self-regulate. So many people,
Mm.
we refer to ourselves as adults, but really and truly, we're no more than, cantankerous, tantrum-driven children in our world. I mean, look at our politics today. That's just one example. So, I mean, I
It
love the
is.
fact that EFT can be used to not only help us to self-regulate, but also to drill down deeper to unveil what's really under the surface. As I always say to people, the tip of the iceberg is not what sank the Titanic. And too many times we just get so enamored with what's going on at the tip of the iceberg with all of these sexy different terminologies and things of that nature. And we're scared really to look underneath and to access what's under.
Mhm.
And if EFT can do that, if tapping can do that to help us to get down to the bottom, to really face that inner aspect of ourselves, to have the courage and the ability to self-soothe, to have those difficult conversations.
Oh, so much. I was working with a woman today who is just, we are dealing with the ability to speak up for themselves. And what it came down to for them was it wasn't okay to be angry, right? Of course, where did they learn that it's not, I mean, on a spiritual path, anger is not good, all of that. And yet, when we got to the bottom of that, of course, it came from an angry father that they couldn't feel safe being angry with. And when we work through their ability to just see, wow, anger can actually help. Anger can be done well, and it can help us move through things and get courage to speak up for ourselves and take steps and set boundaries and do things. And it can also be done where it causes harm. So all emotions have a place. And I love what you said about my life, and we'll say disease is the tip of the iceberg. When we can start to get curious, when we can start to be understanding for ourselves,
Mhm,
when we can start to know that we're doing the best that we can, or we did the best we could with what we had, and we
mhm.
can always then be more compassionate and more curious and more understanding, like we are with the child. If we can do that with ourselves, we are being the best ally for a child to teach them, to demonstrate them, and to be our best selves. But we're also human and we're fallible and we make mistakes and we have to make hard decisions and we have responsibilities and we have stressors. That's part of being in this culture. But EFT is really an amazingly powerful, despite what it looks like, tool for cutting through those things really quickly that can be self-applied. So yeah, it's
Awesome.
really, I feel blessed to have found it.
Well, I thank you so much for taking the time to share with us these beautiful modalities that we can easily
Mm-hmm.
access. And ladies, in the chat, not the chat, in the notes for today's episode, we'll see the links to Meta Health and also to EFT tapping so that you can connect with Dr. Weiner because it is just, like I said, the tip of the iceberg. So I
Yeah.
encourage you to take that journey within and to reach out and get some assistance if you need. Until next time, my beautiful ladies, peace and blessings.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
thank you for tuning in for this episode of Mommy Heal Thyself. If you like what we're doing here, please share, subscribe, like us, and leave a comment. Your feedback is very much appreciated.